political powder keg ignites what triggered the state of emergency. On March 18, 2025, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu declared a state of emergency in Rivers State, a decision that instantly sparked national and international reactions. The announcement came with immediate and sweeping implications: the suspension of Governor Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy, and all elected members of the Rivers State House of Assembly. President Tinubu's rationale centered on escalating political tension and alleged acts of pipeline vandalism within the state. Citing a breakdown in law and order and security threats, the federal government justified the imposition of emergency rule as a necessary intervention to stabilize Rivers State. However, conflicting reports quickly began to surface. The central claim about pipeline vandalism, the supposed trigger for the emergency, was flatly denied by the oil companies operating in the region. No explosion, fire outbreak, or destruction was recorded by independent observers, oil companies, or local emergency responders. This contradiction has fueled skepticism about the federal government's true intentions. It's akin to firing your apartment building's manager over a fire that never happened, then handing the keys to someone from another city while locking out the residents who voted him in. This scenario has resonated with the public and heightened suspicions of a political power play disguised as a security measure. Civil society organizations, legal experts, and influential political figures wasted no time in responding. The Nigerian Bar Association, NBA, one of the most respected legal bodies in the country, issued a statement condemning the president's action as unconstitutional. The NBA emphasized that Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution does not give the president powers to suspend democratically elected officials, especially when the threshold for emergency conditions, such as war, natural disaster, or outright anarchy, had not been met. NBA President Mazi Afam-Osigwe labeled the move a grave violation of democratic governance, adding that such actions threaten the foundation of Nigeria's federalism. Regional leaders across the Niger Delta also voiced outrage, noting that the federal response bypassed both legal and political protocol. The emergency declaration has been widely viewed as a strategy to centralize power in a politically significant oil-rich state ahead of the 2027 general elections. Critics argue that the suspension of Fubara and his allies was less about resolving a real crisis and more about neutralizing opposition forces within Rivers State. The backlash has set the stage for a broader national conversation about executive power, federal overreach, and the fragility of Nigeria's democratic institutions. As the situation unfolds, questions remain. Was the emergency truly about security, or is it the beginning of a larger political reshuffle cloaked in constitutional ambiguity? Defections, deceptions, and the Supreme Court twist. The political drama in Rivers State took a sharp turn when 27 lawmakers, originally elected under the platform of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, defected to the All Progressives Congress, APC. These lawmakers made their intentions public by submitting a formal letter of defection, which was read on the floor of the Rivers State House of Assembly. Videos circulated widely on social media showing the legislators waving APC flags in the legislative chambers, while others were captured at a public rally hosted by APC leadership, officially announcing their new allegiance. The move was bold, blatant, and caught on camera, leaving little room for ambiguity. The legal implications of their actions are staggering. Nigerian constitutional law dictates that legislators who switch political parties mid-term without a division or collapse in their original party must vacate their seats. This principle has been upheld in various court rulings by admitting to their defection through a sworn affidavit in court. And then attempting to retract it, the lawmakers open themselves to charges of perjury. Moreover, there is a growing concern about a lack of representation. These defected lawmakers have not participated in legislative duties benefiting their constituencies since their switch, raising questions about who truly represents the people of Rivers State. The controversy escalated further when the Supreme Court, in a shocking move, issued a judgment that effectively recognized the defected lawmakers' continued legitimacy. Legal scholars and critics quickly pointed out that this case was never before the Supreme Court to begin with. Instead, it was still pending before a Rivers State High Court, where indigenous citizens had filed a suit challenging the defectors' right to remain in office. The apex court's unsolicited intervention was viewed as judicial overreach. Constitutional lawyers warned that this breach in judicial procedure sets a dangerous precedent, where the highest court in the land could be seen as inserting itself into political crises for unclear reasons. This turn of events raises a profound question for Nigerian democracy. If lawmakers can defect, keep their seats, and still dictate the state's future, what's the point of voting? Voters elect representatives based on party manifestos, ideologies, and governance promises. Allowing elected officials to switch sides without consequence undermines democratic accountability and breaks the social contract between voters and their representatives. It signals a worrying trend in Nigerian politics, one where power games and backroom deals take precedence over constitutional integrity and the will of the people. As the legal battle continues, the judiciary's next moves will determine whether the rule of law stands or political impunity prevails. The money trail. Why financial control is the real battle while political turmoil and legal disputes dominate headlines. Another layer of the Rivers State crisis is quietly brewing beneath the surface control over the state's vast financial reserves. Insider reports indicate that prior to the imposition of the state of emergency, Rivers State had amassed savings totaling in the hundreds of billions of naira. This fiscal prudence was seen as one of Governor Fubara's major achievements, aimed at long-term infrastructural projects and debt servicing. The sudden removal of Fubara and the installation of a federally appointed sole administrator raised immediate alarm bells. Who now has access to the state's funds and for what purpose? The fear among Rivers residents and political observers is that the sole administrator, lacking constitutional recognition, might gain undue access to these resources. Critics argue that this is not merely a political intervention but an economic hijack. Without legislative oversight or state-level accountability, funds intended for public welfare could be redirected without transparency. There are growing calls for commercial banks to publicly disclose account access and expenditure records since the emergency declaration. Activists are demanding that Rivers State's finances be insulated from political interference to protect the economic future of its citizens. To illustrate the absurdity of the situation, think of it this way. It's like freezing your sibling's bank account, then handing their ATM card to a neighbor and calling it peacekeeping. That metaphor captures the sentiments of many Rivers citizens who see this move as both invasive and insulting. Local leaders have expressed concern that it sets a dangerous precedent, one in which the federal government can bypass constitutional checks to take control of a state's purse under the guise of restoring order. The fact that no clear budget has been presented since the takeover has only deepened suspicions. This controversy also taps into a long-standing grievance among oil-producing states in the Niger Delta, the 13% derivation formula. Though these states produce the lion's share of Nigeria's oil revenue, they receive only a fraction in return. Rivers, Delta, and Bayelsa have often argued that they fund federal budgets but are left underdeveloped. With the sole administrator now potentially managing Rivers funds without local input, fears have resurfaced that federal interests are once again prioritizing extraction over equity. The struggle for control over Rivers State's money is not just a budgetary concern, it has a battle over economic justice, self-determination, and the right of a state to chart its own financial future within the bounds of the Nigerian Federation. Grassroots voices and Governor Fubara's silent resistance. In the midst of the political theatrics and federal impositions dominating national headlines, some of the most vital voices have been those from the grassroots community leaders, civil society advocates, and local stakeholders in Rivers State. Activist and environmentalist Ann Kio Briggs has emerged as one of the most vocal critics of the behind-the-scenes political negotiations aimed at coercing Governor Siminalayi Fubara into signing backdoor agreements with his predecessor, Nyesom Wike. Speaking directly to Fubara during a town hall forum, Briggs urged him to stop signing things in the middle of the night and to consult openly with the people of Rivers State. Her message resonated with many who feel that the state's destiny should not be dictated from Abuja or manipulated by former political office holders. Governor Fubara, for his part, has made repeated efforts to reach out to the defected lawmakers in a bid to foster dialogue and maintain institutional governance. Contrary to media portrayals suggesting political arrogance or obstinacy, Fubara sent multiple formal invitations to the dissident lawmakers through the secretary to the state government. When those were ignored, he personally penned letters requesting meetings to discuss governance issues, including the state budget. Yet each olive branch was met with rejection, with the lawmakers claiming procedural grievances and ultimately refusing to acknowledge his legitimacy. Their refusal to engage has led to governance paralysis and exposed a deeper political strategy stalling the system to force a federal intervention. Despite the political ambush, Governor Fubara remains in Port Harcourt, going about his duties with quiet determination. Recent footage shows him attending official events, engaging with religious leaders, and meeting with community stakeholders. He has refrained from inflammatory rhetoric, choosing instead to comply with judicial orders and work through legal channels. His demeanor has been widely interpreted as a form of silent resistance, a commitment to constitutionalism even in the face of political marginalization. Supporters argue that his behavior exemplifies the maturity and decorum expected of a democratically elected leader in a volatile political climate. The greatest irony in this unfolding crisis is that Governor Fubara is being punished not for misconduct, but for attempting to obey the law. His insistence on legal process, respect for democratic institutions, and peaceful engagement has been labeled as obstructionist by those who stand to benefit from instability. Meanwhile, those undermining due process are hailed as peacemakers. It's a twisted narrative, one that reveals the fragile state of Nigeria's democracy, where adherence to the rule of law can be seen as a threat and constitutional defiance is rewarded with federal support. Governor Fubara's resilience and the unwavering support of the people of Rivers State offers a powerful counter-narrative to the official version of events. In this story, resistance isn't loud, it's deliberate, strategic, and dignified. What's next? Impeachment rumors, regional impact, and federal silence. As tensions continue to mount in Rivers State, a new wave of political uncertainty has emerged, with reports that defected lawmakers are now considering impeachment proceedings against Governor Siminalayi Fubara. This latest twist comes after the lawmakers rejected every attempt at reconciliation, including direct invitations and written appeals from the governor himself. Notably, these lawmakers had previously declared an indefinite recess, a move that conveniently stalled legislative functions and blocked the presentation of the state budget. Their abrupt return to announce impeachment threats appears calculated, deepening suspicions that their aim is not governance but political sabotage orchestrated with external support. The implications of this orchestrated maneuver extend beyond Rivers State. There are growing concerns that if the federal intervention in Rivers is allowed to stand unchallenged, similar takeovers could be replicated in other politically strategic states across the Niger Delta, such as Bayelsa, Akwa Ibom, and Delta. These states, like Rivers, are rich in oil and politically influential. If federal forces can override elected leadership in one state under the pretext of emergency governance, then the precedent opens the door for a broader campaign of regional consolidation. The fear is that the current crisis is less about restoring peace and more about paving the way for control of electoral machinery ahead of the 2027 general elections. The Pan-Niger Delta Forum, PANDEF, during a high-profile summit, presented a comprehensive list of developmental priorities to President Tinubu, including calls for improved infrastructure, equitable revenue sharing, port revitalization, and environmental restoration. However, insiders report that the president only addressed one issue, the political crisis in Rivers State. His silence on every other concern has sparked outrage among Niger Delta stakeholders who see the selective response as a clear indication of misplaced priorities. Rather than engaging with long-standing developmental challenges, the federal government appears focused solely on controlling political narratives and undermining subnational autonomy. This leads to a chilling but necessary question. Is this truly about governance, or is it a calculated attempt to dominate Niger Delta oil politics ahead of 2027? Observers note that the Niger Delta, being the economic engine of Nigeria due to its oil wealth, has always been a coveted political prize. With elections on the horizon, ensuring that this region is under friendly control would offer significant advantages. But at what cost? If democratic processes are continually sacrificed for short-term political gain, the long-term result could be regional disillusionment, civic unrest, and further erosion of federal trust. The people of Rivers and the Niger Delta more broadly are watching. And they are beginning to speak not just in protest, but in demands for accountability, transparency, and respect for their constitutional rights. Closing thoughts: democracy on the line? The unfolding crisis in Rivers State stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of Nigeria's democratic institutions. The contradictions are glaring. The emergency declaration was based on claims of pipeline vandalism that were never substantiated. The Supreme Court weighed in on matters that were neither procedurally presented before it nor within its current jurisdiction. And an elected governor, along with his deputy and legislature, was effectively sidelined without due process. These irregularities are not minor administrative hiccups. They strike at the very heart of constitutional governance, undermining public trust in institutions meant to uphold the rule of law. At the center of this controversy is the troubling normalization of federal interference in state affairs. The dangerous precedent being set that a sitting governor can be suspended under questionable legal frameworks, and that financial control of a state can be transferred without transparency must not go unchallenged. If unchecked, these developments could embolden future administrations to adopt similar authoritarian tactics, thereby weakening the autonomy of other states. As civic participants, Nigerians must resist the temptation to treat this as politics as usual. As the saying goes, the more we normalize federal interference without accountability, the less safe our democracy becomes. This is not just a Rivers State problem, it's a national problem with far-reaching implications. The issues of unlawful legislative defections, judicial overreach, financial manipulation, and manipulated impeachment threats speak to a systemic rot that, if left untreated, could spread beyond the Niger Delta. Civil society, journalists, legal experts, and the electorate must continue to demand transparency, challenge unconstitutional actions, and support leaders who demonstrate a commitment to peace and due process. Governor Fubara's quiet resilience in the face of adversity should be seen not as weakness, but as a model of responsible governance under pressure. As we close this chapter of our analysis, we leave you with pressing questions that will define the next phase of this political saga. Will the president backtrack and correct what many believe was a poorly advised move? Will the judiciary rise to its constitutional responsibility and draw a firm line in defense of federalism and justice? And perhaps most urgently, how long can Governor Fubara continue to hold the line for democracy in Rivers State without broader institutional support? These are not just rhetorical questions, they are reflections of a nation standing at a crossroads. In the coming weeks, as new developments unfold, we will continue to track the story that could ultimately redefine Nigeria's democratic destiny.